Hello, everyone. Today, I'm not going to talk about Galaxy Brain stuff. I'm not going to talk about future of governance stuff or crazy new features we're going to add or whatever. But if you want to chat about that later, please talk to me or Noah. Instead, we're going to talk about architecture and customization of DAO DAO and all the different open source smart contracts, open source UI tools that we have. I think a lot of people might not be familiar with all them, and how you can easily take DAO DAO and customize it for your use case. So yeah, we're going to cover DAO DAO's architecture. We're going to talk about how you can customize it for your needs. Governance is one of those things where there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right? We're going to talk about how you can easily integrate DAO DAO with some of your contracts and turn them into valid components of DAO DAO. We're going to talk about hooks and various things you can build with hooks. We're going to talk about some of our many utility contracts. And we're going to talk about UI packages. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about design philosophy. So the thing you need to know about DAO DAO is it's not just one big contract. Instead, it's all DAO DAO DAOs are made up of many different modules. There's the core module. That's kind of what your DAO address is. That holds the DAO treasury, and it registers all the other different modules. You have the voting power module, and this is this determines the voting power in the DAO. So for any given address, what is their voting power at a given block height, right? These, there's many different types of proposal modules, right? Proposal modules manage proposals in the DAO, and they can execute messages against the DAO. And finally, we have this concept of a pre-proposed module, which is really it's optionally attached to a proposal module. And what that does is it allows for custom proposal creation logic. Like you need to accept a certain amount of deposits, or maybe you want to force people to go through a drafting phase instead of randomly YOLOing a prop on chain, right? So let's start with the core module. In many ways, this is the most simplest, and it's also one that you probably never need to touch. And if you do need to touch it for some reason, I want to talk to you and learn why you felt that means we probably need to change some stuff. But basically the core module registers all the other modules, holds the treasury like we talked about. So it knows what its voting module is, which gives the voting power. It knows all the different proposal modules attached to it, and it optionally has a parent DAO. So let's talk about voting power. This is probably one of the most useful ones that might be for the people in this room. This contract, again, controls who can vote in the DAO and what their voting power is. You can really actually quite easily make any contract into a voting power module by implementing a simple interface. We'll go back to that. So how you make your contract a voting power module. Maybe you've got an LP pool and you want to attach a DAO to this LP pool. Or maybe you want to make a voting power module for every NFT in an NFT marketplace, right? I don't know, you've got some use case, amazing. All you need to do is actually implement 2 queries. Just 2 queries, that's it. Voting power at height, which takes an address, and then an optional block height. And then total voting power at height, which just takes a height, an optional height. And that's it. And with those 2 queries, you can make any contract into a valid voting power contract for a DAO. There's also an optional query, which is active. So for some cases, you might want to, for example, in a token staking DAO, you only want you don't want the first people to come in there, you've got less than 1% of the supply staked, and then they just pass a prop to mint more tokens. Instead, with something like is active, you could make it so that 5% of tokens have to be staked before any proposals could be passed, right? So the is active query kind of just determines whether or not enough voting power is readily available. And so what are some things you can do with by making your contract into a custom voting power module? Well, you could integrate it with a DeFi protocol. So if maybe you have a vault that people lock tokens in and you want to have some governance related to that vault, like in mesh security. Or maybe you have a token pool and you want people to, whatever. But I think an even more interesting one is what if you want to make a more combine a bunch of different sources of voting power? right? So you might have a token-based voting thing, and maybe if you hold a Bad Kids NFT, you get some extra voting power. Or maybe you have some like elected membership, right? And they get voting power for being on, you know, some core thing, right? It's up to you, but I think that this is actually something that's really quite interesting to explore with, and I'd be curious to pick any of your brains if you want to do something along those lines. And we have a lot of examples. So, you know, if you go in the DAO DAO contracts repo, there's a whole voting thing. We've got CW4 group membership DAOs. We got CW20 DAOs. I know those are dead, but you know, whatever. Still, people still use them. We have NFT staking, right? We have an NFT rolls, which is kind of an experimental one. And we have native token staking, which works with Token Factory and even things like IBC denoms. But you know, I think we gotta make some more. And actually, a challenge to the Cosmos SDK devs out here. Let's figure out how we can hook this up to Cosmos SDK staking, so we can have things like, you know, multiple choice proposals, ranked choice proposals. If anyone wants to jam on that, please tell me. But we've got a lot of examples. If you're looking, how do I make my contract into a voting module? There you go. Let's talk about proposal modules. Okay, proposal modules are registered with the core module, and they can execute any Cosmos message against it. That could be an Aussie message, it could be some Osmosis like GAM module message, right? Could be also other Cosmos messages, obviously, right? And the cool thing about this is you can actually have multiple proposal modules. You can actually have you could have a bunch of different single choice proposal modules, and they could all have different settings, different thresholds for doing things, right? You could have, you know, we'll show some of our examples, but you can actually attach many different proposal modules to this. And these modules can also be added or removed after your DAO creation. So if you made your DAO with one proposal module and you want to add like a new cool, you know, ranked choice voting one, you can do that. Amazing. And so how does it work? You know, basically, you know, when we execute a proposal, like the core module is like, is this sender a registered proposal module? And if yes, we execute the messages, and if no, it's unauthorized. We're going to be working on some cool stuff later, but around like permissions for modules, but that's future stuff. So how do you make your contract a valid proposal module? Well, this is an even simpler interface, right? Now, obviously, your module must be registered with the core module, but all you have to do is like execute proposal hook and pass all the messages you want. That's it. And so what are some use cases you could do with this? Well, you could fork one of the existing examples and do custom voting logic, right? That'd be the biggest one. Maybe you have a protocol that's like deeply integrated with your DAO, right? And you want that protocol to be able to execute messages on behalf of the DAO itself, right? And then finally, we have a DAO migrator contract. So we have all these different modules, right? And then upgrading them was like kind of a complicated thing, right? So you could actually add, like when you migrate your DAO to like whatever new version or whatever new major version, you actually just add a DAO migrator as a proposal module, and it does all the migration logic, upgrading every single contract in the DAO, and then it uninstalls itself. So you can do a lot with proposal modules, and I'd be curious to hear anyone else's requirements, but it's actually pretty simple. You just got to have one execute message. And there's a lot of different proposal module examples, right? So single choice voting, vote yes, no, or abstain on a single proposal. It'd really be really great if we could do no with veto. If someone wants to collaborate on that. Multiple choice voting, right? You know, so pick an option or none of the above. And then we also have ranked choice voting, which needs a little bit more work, but like that's basically, I think it's the first, Zeke is a genius, but I think it's one of the first actually on-chain, like fully on-chain implementations of ranked choice voting. And so that's pretty cool. And so yeah, if you want to add a no with veto or whatever, like forking one of these is like a really great, you know, start, and please contribute it upstream. That would be amazing. Pre-proposed modules. Now these I think are really interesting and like insanely powerful, because it's all about, you know, oftentimes the process for something coming up to a vote is just as important as the actual vote itself, right? If you think about like in Congress or whatever, like they have a whole set of like, you have to work through various committees, right? And then it finally goes to the floor for a vote, right? And we can think about, I mean, I've also experienced some governance hiccups in the Cosmos world, because people can just throw stuff on chain, and you know, it might even be the right idea, but So the idea with pre-proposal modules, they're extensions of proposal modules, right? And they can enable like basically pre-flight checks on proposal creation. So what are some things that are made with this? Like, right, we can require a proposal deposit is paid before proposal creation. That's a really simple one, right? We expect that. We can basically have permissions around who's allowed to make proposals. So in DAO DAO, you can actually have anyone can make a proposal, right? Or you can have it only DAO members, right? Or maybe only a specific address. We can also require approval before proposal creation. So one of the cool things that we've added in DAO DAO is both a veto flow, but also an approval flow, right? Which is actually being used by the Atom Accelerator DAO in combination with their Guernsey Trust. So they actually have like this legal DAO hybrid thing where the Guernsey Trust approves proposals. You know, they just do all their due diligence and stuff, and then now you've got a governance system that exactly matches like the legal system, right? And then finally, I think it'd be really cool, we could implement proposal drafts with this. You could actually force that people have to like go through a drafting period and a comment period before YOLOing something on chain. And this would have saved so much headaches in the Cosmos world. I wish we had that for Prop 16. And we got a couple of pre-proposed modules examples. Hopefully you get the idea. You got a DAO contracts, right? And they're all in their different categories. We have single choice, right? Multiple choice. This just enforces deposit, creation logic, you know, who can create, et cetera. And then we have these approval and approver flows, which are really neat because they basically implement an approval flow where when the proposals begin, they start in a pending state. And then they automatically create approval proposals in whoever the approver DAO is, right? So that's like a nice UX thing. So it just shows up in their DAO inbox. And then the approver DAO votes to like allow or disallow the pending proposals. So there's a lot you can do with these like pre-proposed modules in addition to like the proposal modules. Let's talk about hooks, right? Let's say you want to do like a voting incentives contract or a proposal incentives contract. You want to incentivize good governance. Well, you would do that with something like DAO hooks, right? So basically DAO hooks, we have a whole package for this, has like all the common like DAO DAO events, right? And so almost all DAO contracts like allow you to register hooks, which I think is like when you're building your own contracts, even for DeFi stuff, think about what might be useful things to add as hooks that other people could build stuff on top of, right? So some of the common ones are we have voting hooks, right? So they fire when a new vote is cast. We have various different proposal hooks. So like a new proposal, like when a proposal is created, or every time it changes the status, i.e. gets rejected or executed or vetoed, et cetera, right? We have staking hooks. So staking and unstaking tokens and NFTs. Whenever membership in a DAO changes, you might want to use these hooks so you can react and do other things on, you know, these events. We have a ton of utility contracts. We actually have more than are listed here. And you know, these would be great things to collaborate on. Like we don't need like 20 different vesting contracts, right? We just want like one really good one that works for a lot of people. But we do have a really awesome vesting contract. It allows for vesting native and token factory tokens and CW20s, also with native staking. And I think a key thing here is this one supports optional cancellation. So you don't have to do a whole chain upgrade to cancel someone's like Cosmos SDK vesting. So that's pretty cool. We have an admin factory. Sometimes you want to instantiate contracts with the factory and you want them to be self-admin, right? So for example, when we instantiate the DAO from the UI, we want the DAO to have the admin of itself because you know, we don't want to be in control of everybody's funds. That would suck from a regulatory standpoint. We have a token factory issuer contract, which is pretty cool. If you're working with token factory, take a look at that. It basically issues tokens factory tokens, but has a bunch of other features that you can enable. So for example, being able to like force transfer or add before send hooks. So like maybe you want to make a token that is not freely tradable right away, right? I think that the beauty about tokens is its programmable value, and I think the interesting meta is like exploring how we can make more interesting rules around it, right? Like, we have CW token swap. That's like kind of like an escrow contract, so two DAOs can like automatically swap between each other. We have a bounties contract. This one's experimental, but we'd love to get some more eyes on it. Basically, it's like, yeah, make bounties for your DAO, right? We have this one that is perhaps my favorite, and it's been a work in progress, but we have a really cool augmented bonding curve implementation. So if you want to play around with like some new token models around augmented bonding curves, so basically buying and selling a token off of a bonding curve instead of like trying to mint 1 trillion dog tokens and then trying to have like, I don't know, like $1,000 of liquidity on Osmosis, you can do that. And it's also augmented, so you can have different curve phases, right? So you could have a hatch phase where everyone can come in. You can have entry and exit fees. So when people are buying and selling the token off of the bonding curve, that could actually go to a DAO treasury. And that's all working. It's not audited, but it's we'd love for people to try it out. And then finally, we actually have also experimental voting and proposal incentives, which I think could be really fun. Is like, how do you reward amazing governance participation? Like, you make a successful proposal, get a reward, right? Or how do you just like reward people that are being active in governance, right? All right, let's get to the good stuff. DAO DAO UI, shout out, hashtag thanks Noah. Want to build your own DAO UI? We got you. The DAO, like, DAO's fully open source, you know, the repo has a lot of useful packages for building custom DAO front ends, right? We have a bunch of UI components. We'd love for people to figure out how to improve them, make them more easy to style and things like that. We have a ton of utils around like message encoding and a lot more stuff. Like, who's here has built an Auth UI? All right, I'm so happy that there is more than 0 hands up, but 2 people. I think Auth is one of the coolest features, and it's like sad that we don't see it like used more frequently, because encoding those Auth messages is really just kind of a nightmare. And so like, yeah, check out the DAO utils, right? Also all the like React query hooks and stuff you need for getting the information from the DAOs in the first place, right? And there's a lot more good stuff in there. Talk with Noah Sasso if you're interested. You know, we want people to build with them. We want feedback on them. We want other contributors, right? We're a DAO, not a company. It's an organization of organizations. Want to quickly build a website for your DAO, right? So sometimes, like, you know, DAO DAO UI is great if you want to if you're part of a bunch of DAOs, right? But sometimes you just want a DAO for your NFT project, right? And you don't want people to go to the DAO DAO website and have all this other complicated stuff thrown at them, right? You just want an interface for your project. And we've got you covered again. In fact, we have a fully working example called SDA, or Single DAO App. And you can find it in the DAO DAO UI repo /apps/SDA. And it looks like this. So, you know, here's a picture of the DAO, and, you know, we got staking your tokens up front. You can see, like, you got different pages for all the proposals and stuff. And it's just one DAO. It's not like there's a bunch of different things going on here, right? So we actually, and this is another view, this is a list of the sub-DAOs, but we'd love more people to build with this kind of stuff and like play around and explore new ideas. Let's make interchain governance the best governance in crypto. Come on, let's go. So I guess this brings me to like maybe like wrapping it up a bit so we could get to questions and maybe talk about some more interesting things, but like kind of like some of the design philosophy that we're going for with DAO DAO in terms of this architecture. And maybe this is inspirational for you, maybe not. I think good architecture is composable. So like, you know, in essence, for a long time, we've been saying that DAO DAO is like a set of governance Lego blocks. Because again, there's not any one size fits all system that's gonna work for every kind of structure or every kind of organization. And so we want to make these little Lego blocks, and you can compose them into the various different types of things that you want to make, right? You know. I think good architecture is customizable. This is a screenshot of Emacs. I like Emacs. You can just do everything in Emacs because it's like the most insanely customizable thing like ever, right? And like that's, you know, what we are striving towards with these Lego blocks is we want you to be able to take them, and you don't have to change everything else, right? Like maybe you just want to make a custom voting contract, but you don't want to have to write everything else, right? Like we want you to be able to change that, just like one little thing that you need to change, and not have to like fork the whole thing and then become like out of date with like all the other new features that are coming in, right? Like. So yeah, we want to make things highly customizable, right? And then finally, and I think this one might be a little bit less intuitive, I think good architecture is circular, or it's like a little bit recursive. What I mean by this is like, this is how DAOs of DAOs of DAOs, like it's DAOs all the way down, right? And the thing with DAO DAO is like you can have all these different DAOs, and they can vote in each other, right? We have the sub DAOs, right, where you can have a parent DAO and then all these different children underneath, and they all use the same contracts. That's what I mean by like that recursive nature, right? Where you have this one little component and you can just combine it in so many different interesting ways to get these very new properties. And so whenever I come across something that's kind of like the snake eating its own tail, I'm like, oh wow, that's a good design, because now, you know, to do sub DAOs, for example, like we could have done them one way where there'd be like, you know, a separate kind of, it's much better if it's like these little pieces that are all the same and yet you compose them together and we get wonderful new properties. And then this is my call to action is, you know, again, we're making some pretty cool public goods here. We don't have any money, but we do have DAO tokens, and hopefully we can get some public goods funding going. Or really, I think the key point is that from the beginning, when we started DAO DAO, we wanted it to be an organization of organizations. Making really great governance tooling is a lot of work, right? And teams should not have to reinvent the wheel. We want teams to be able to focus on their DeFi protocol and things like that. And we want collaborators. We want to make these the best set of governance blocks that we can build. And we welcome all teams to like join the organization of organizations. Like, let's make some really amazing governance tooling so that we can power like sovereign communities and sovereign blockchains. If you want to brainstorm on anything governance, it's my favorite topic. Come find me, or come find Noah, raise your hand, Noah. Or, you know, reach out if you're just watching this on video. Our DMs are open, and we'd always love to talk to you about anything you need related to governance, anything you would like to see change or come in the next DAO DAO version. And yeah, that's my talk. So, questions? Dave.
Yeah, so one of the really cool things about voting is we can make decisions in very many new ways. But how do you imagine UIs working with this? Like, you know, just ranked choice voting needs a very different UI than just plurality voting. How do we imagine composability of that with a DAO DAO ecosystem?
I think that we make a lot of open source components that are really good UX defaults, right? And like, people can always fork it or like make their own version. But again, like, having a really great set of Lego blocks, I don't think is just about the contracts or just about like the back end, right? It's also about the UX, right? And so I think kind of the idea that we're going for with DAO DAO is we make a really good default UX, and we do so with like very little resources, but like a lot of genius of Noah, right? Like I think the key thing is just breaking these things out into components and having really great examples, right? And like having a really beautiful default, right? And it takes a lot of work. And I think this is actually something that we need to do more of in Cosmos. Like, there's so many game-changing features that have existed, but they only exist in code, right? Like, so think about interchain accounts. Interchain accounts are so powerful, and yet we didn't have any UI for them aside from like Stride, right? Like, so the only thing you do would like cross stake, and we have this amazing technology. And as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, I think DAO DAO was like the first really rich UI for like really leveraging like interchain accounts with DAOs, right? Like, same thing with AuthZ. Like, AuthZ is this immensely powerful feature, and yet there's like hardly been any good UIs for it, right? And it's like, you can use AuthZ in DAO DAO today. It's not the best, right? But again, we're dealing with very limited resources here, so we punch above our weight. And I think that one of the things that we should think of as a technologist is not just building the really cool backend technology, but when we do, making sure there's some user experience for it, right? Like, AuthZ was built and existed for years, and we didn't have actually a way to like use it as normal people except on like the command line, right? And like, even Cosmos SDK governance, such a core thing for so long, like, you could only make it from a command line. Like, you could only make a proposal from a command line, right? Like, and even with like the latest version of like Cosmos SDK 47 and 50, like, we make one of the only front ends that allow you no code UI, go in, make a Cosmos governance prop. So I think when we think about like public goods funding and just generally as technologists, we also need to be making default user experience components around this that are open source that teams can use as a base, so we can make much richer applications that show off the potential of the interchain. Like, we have like the best tech, but if we don't have the any user experience to match it, no one's going to know about the power of AuthZ. No one's going to know about the power of interchain accounts. And so let's make some cool open source front-end technologies that showcases how awesome the interchain is.
Cool, I really appreciate it. And I think I totally agree, having the ability to showcase like how does a DAO component work when in use. But for like DAOs that don't necessarily require any kind of user interaction, when you start designing, and I know you went through your design philosophy around this, is it strictly based on like, like for like a common user, like an everyday person, or are you also abstracting this to where it could be completely not user friendly? It's really just like a complex DAO model that could be serverless, or it could be completely governed by contracts. Like it has nothing to do with usability, it just has more to do with like how things are complexly automated, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think this gets into like the future of DAOs a little bit and where we want to go with the future direction of DAO DAO, which is like actually a lot more automation, like a lot more like voting sucks, right? We need voting. It's kind of, but we don't want to vote on everything. Like ideally, I think there's two high level objectives we should go for. And I will admit, like our goals with DAO DAO is not just to build the best governance tooling in crypto, but just to build better governance tooling in general. Because I don't know who out here has started like a company and had to deal with all these lawyers and shit. It's a nightmare, right? We can make something better for sovereign communities. I think that the key thing is like also we have to also acknowledge that voting sucks, right? And that ideally, we're I think a few years away from a DAO just setting a policy, like you only vote on the policy and then the policy gets automatically implemented, right? Or another thing is like how often does anyone remember all the debates about what we set a parameter to, like inflation? And people have all this like back and forth, and they're like, and they like in order to change it, someone has to write a long treatise, right? And then they get attacked on Twitter, so no one wants to like participate in governance anymore because there's like so much drama. What if instead we just leverage the hive mind and everyone who's a staker sets their preference for what that number should be, right? So instead of like having a big proposal to make one big decision, we leverage the hive mind, right? Where everyone expresses their preferences about something, and then that results automatically in actuality. And then I can have a conversation with like Jay or with Noah, and then maybe they change my mind, and then I go and I update my preference. And then like to me, I think this is like much better UX for governance tooling. Is like how can we get to like policies, right? Where as a DAO we are going to do X and then it just automatically happens, right? The only thing you have to vote on is what you're going to do. Or how do we get more to this like hive mind kind of like cybernetic organism kind of thing where we just provide the inputs to, and those inputs, our preferences, like have actual like weight in what the outcome is. I think that these are the ideas that I really want to push for. And I think we're gonna, we're fucking getting into them. Like we're doing it. We're gonna make amazing governance tooling. And yeah, UX is a complicated topic. I think that one of the things that we try to do is we are building for power users right now, because I think it's kind of better that way. We don't go out marketing like, hey, use your DAO with your LLC normies. Like, I mean, you could totally do that, right? But like, I think a responsible development of technology is making a good UX for the people that actually kind of understand the things and use it. And then after we like iterate on it, like if you saw DAO DAO like 2 years ago, right? Versus you see it today, it's already so much easier to use, right? Like we're on a journey so that like every company or nonprofit or country or local government is going to use this stuff because it's actually better and more transparent and more efficient and has a lot less bullshit and red tape around it. So